All right, great. Well, thanks, folks, for spending your time on this. I have to apologize. I was saying to Zach as I jumped in the call, literally this morning, I woke up with a scratchy throat. I am definitely sick. I really apologize. Already not like the most pleasant voice to listen to, but we'll get through it. Everything will be fine. Okay, so as Zach and Ali mentioned, and as you've seen, this is a discussion on the book, The Misinformation Age. If you haven't read the book, it's fine. If you have read the book, you will probably recognize some of the quotes that I've pulled from it. As Ali mentioned, I'll be talking just for a very short amount of time, and then I'm hoping the vast majority of our time together can be spent on discussing some of the themes of the book and what we have pulled out of it. So just really quickly, how many people, can I just get a show of Zoom hand emojis? How many people have read the book? Meg, great job. Jen, okay. A few, okay. Looks like hands aren't staying up long enough to get an accurate count, but
I'm seeing like,
okay.
I think I saw 5 or 6 hands.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Okay, fine. Okay, great. Like I said, it won't matter if you haven't read the book. I'll say this at the start. I am not receiving any sort of like uh affordances from the authors for the book. I think it is a good book, and I think you should read it. But again, if you haven't for today, it's 100% fine. I'm gonna blitz over this quote that I had up at the top. I don't know how many people see this frequently. I see it all the time. People attributing any kind of quote under the sun to Albert Einstein. And as a function of that, it's very funny to me to imagine pulling quotes from other people talking about misattributing quotes to Albert Einstein. This is, I would say, tangentially related to what we'll talk about today. Eratosthenes of Cyrene, if you don't know, was an ancient Greek scholar, one of the first people to calculate the circumference of the globe. So that's what he's known for, a geographer before geography was a thing. Okay, so here's the agenda for today. I'm going to give a quick overview of the book and some of its themes, and then we have two major discussion themes, let's say, one of which is the ways in which scientists, propagandists, and policymakers interact with one another. And the other is the grain size at which we, people of science, can be effective in encouraging our peers to participate both in the scientific enterprise with a level of, let's say, empathy and in impacting the things that other people believe in the world. Okay, so book overview. This is a quote from John Mandeville, who was a quote unquote explorer in the Renaissance era. If you can't read Old English or Middle English, don't worry because nobody can. So the book is not written in this. This is a quote about a piece of fruit called the vegetable lamb of Tartary, which is a big part of the opening of the book. The vegetable lamb of Tartary, this quote basically says, there in Tartary grows a fruit as though it were a gourd, that when it is ripe and it's cut open, men find within it a little beast, in flesh, in bone, and in blood, as though it were a little lamb made of wool. And men eat both the fruit and the beast, and that is a great marvel. And I have eaten of that beast, and it was wonderful, wonderful. Um, this is a person claiming direct experience eating some sort of plant that grows like a lamb out of it. Now, obviously, to us, that seems absurd. And indeed, it is fake. This is not true. But the book starts with the vegetable lamb of Tartary story and acknowledges that that story persisted for 300 years, despite the fact that there is no evidence for a fruit which grows into a lamb. There's no evidence for that. And people believed it. People said, a person I trust said this. People even said, I saw this myself. The story was propagated throughout Europe for 300 years. By comparison to our modern era, one of the statistics that the book pulls up is that during the 2016 election, the top 20 fake news stories presenting themselves as news, but ultimately sharing information that was untrue. Things like Pope Francis like endorsed Donald Trump, never happened, still shared 8.7 million times. That is more than the number of shares of stories from reputable news sites. And of course, there are a lot of examples also presented in the book of why our beliefs about the world matter. This is maybe the first thesis of the book. The things that we believe, especially as they pertain to the world itself, matter a lot. So, for example, the book pulls the tobacco industry in the United States, which as early as the 1950s knew, like with consensus with the scientific community, even the tobacco industry's own scientists knew that there was a relationship between smoking cigarettes and getting cancer. And even though that consensus existed, there was a disconnect between the scientific consensus and the public consensus that resulted in cigarette sales continuing to rise in sales for many decades after the science was settled. So people's beliefs about the world, their beliefs about scientific truth, their beliefs about what is good or bad as it pertains to action and health and life, those things matter a lot. That's maybe thesis one of the book. And I'm pulling out sort of three broad theses. These are themes that I picked up in the book. I don't want to claim any sort of special insight into the author's goals or what they hoped the reader would get across. I just want to say these are themes that I pulled out of the book. So theme one, beliefs about the world matter. Theme two, you are not immune to propaganda. And I'm talking to everybody, but I'm especially talking to scientists, right? We as scientists often see ourselves as some sort of like ascended beings who, because we engage in a methodologically naturalistic process of knowledge creation, like are are immune to facets like, oh, well, I trust this person more than I trust that person. Oh, Zach, yeah, this is one of my favorites. It's very good. Like, for context, this little Garfield meme is often shared on the internet when people are engaging in perhaps unwitting support of brands, right? Marketing is a form of shifting people's perception and engaging in propaganda, and that's something that nobody is immune to. Even scientists, like you can see here on these quotes pulled from the book, we are susceptible to false beliefs, right? Of course, many scientists believe things that are false. Glass is a liquid that moves very slowly. Yeah, great, Robert. I don't need to point to like things like phrenology, right? Entire disciplines within science predicated on erroneous beliefs. We're not immune to it. Um, And our values as scientists often can and often should inform what we believe, right? Like, I am not a climate scientist, I'm a physicist. I value scientific expertise because I understand what scientific expertise looks like. I understand the process of obtaining scientific expertise. And so when I look at climate science claims, I am way more likely to trust an expert than to trust somebody on, Substack who has got a blog and did their own independent analysis and listens to Joe Rogan and all that stuff, right? Like there is nothing inherently incorrect about determining what beliefs to support based on your values. We just want to be aware of that fact. In fact, it's happening right now, this second. And I don't mean like it's happening out there in the world. I mean, like, literally, if you haven't read the book, you are trusting me, a person who has read the book or says he has read the book and is presenting quotes that are ostensibly from the book. And I am doing like interpretation of the book the best I can. But in principle, the messages that I'm culling out of the book, that I'm plucking and putting into this slideshow, they're messages I want to get across from the book, right? There's not a guarantee that what the presenters or authors of the book would say is what I'm saying. It's happening all around us all the time. So it's something to be aware of. And thesis 3, scientists, this makes all scientists mad, hopefully. It is not enough to just do our job well, right? Every scientist wants to just retreat to that ivory tower, do my research. What happens out there isn't my concern, but it's not enough to behave like that. The main theme throughout the book is that these two scientists, like statisticians, Bayesian inference statisticians, built models of agents. And what you're seeing here is a representation of one of those models where scientists, can folks see my mouse? Great. Okay. So scientists in a group, they interact with one another. They learn about different facets of reality. And crucially, they learn what beliefs are better, quote unquote. That is to say, what beliefs in this model lead to proper action, quote unquote. And these are all operationalized terms. We're not going to get into like a philosophical argument about what proper action constitutes. But for the model, it was simple enough that they had two actions, action A and action B. Action B was the right one. So scientists would probe, they'd do 10 trials, and they would see whether A or B yielded a positive outcome. They would see the proportion of activities, the proportion of their tests in which B led to a better outcome than A, et cetera, et cetera. And they would communicate that information with each other and with agents called policymakers. Policymakers are people who don't have scientific training. They don't engage in the scientific process in the way that scientist agents do, but they have control over the way society organizes and the way that society adapts to information about whether action A or B is better. There is also an agent in the model called the propagandist. And in all of the models that they've shown in the book, there is one propagandist. That is to say, there are 6 scientists, there are any number of scientists, but the book found that one propagandist was enough to accomplish the goals of the propagandist agent, which is to advocate and produce change in favor of a specific viewpoint. So in this model, the propagandist wants all of the policymakers to take action A, and we've represented that by the light color. So light-colored agents believe that A is better than B. Dark-colored agents believe that B is better than A. And what happens in the model is that scientists run trials like we do. We run scientific trials, and we determine a proportion for our study, a proportional confidence that B or A is better. So sometimes scientists might learn pretty convincingly that B is a better action than A. Some scientists might only have a little bit of confidence that B is better than A. Some scientists, because science is a statistical process, might come to the erroneous conclusion that A is better than B. But that's okay for scientists because on average, our statistical process of generating knowledge will lead us to the correct belief that B is better than A. But what happens is that, for example, a propagandist can do the same set of 8 trials, know that B is better than A, and then selectively share that information with policymakers. So when a scientist who learns from their own experience that B and A are roughly equivalent, but then talks to their peers, and all of their peers say, actually, B is better than A. There are more positive outcomes from B than there are from A. Communicates that information with the policymakers. These lines represent relationships between agents, right? So this policymaker down here is connected to three different scientists, 2 of which say that B is at least as good as A or better than A, 1 of which says that A is better than B. This scientist is connected to 2 scientists who both say B is better than A, but the propagandist, who is connected to all policymakers, is selectively sharing only those data which correspond to A being better than B. And the outcome is that even as scientists tend to converge on proper belief, that is to say, in the model, which action, A or B, is better, policymakers are being influenced against that belief. They are being influenced in the wrong direction because a propagandist agent is engaging with them in a way that scientists don't. They are taking data out, they are selectively sharing things, they're framing things different, where scientists in this model are just saying, here's what I found, you do the policy work. So it's not enough for scientists just to say, I do my science, I give that data to other people, and they decide what to do from there. That is the major thesis. So here's a quote from the book. Policymakers approach certainty that the wrong action is better, no matter how much evidence the scientific community produces. As long as the propagandist remains active, the policymakers will never be convinced of the truth. And that applies to uncorrupt scientists, quote unquote, scientists who are not engaged in propaganda. They are not engaged in selective sharing. But if they are participating in a system in which propagandists are active, it's not enough. It simply isn't enough for them to do their job and do their job only. So they present a number of models in the misinformation age, and in every single model described, a single propagandist agent is enough to successfully influence policymakers away from true beliefs, even when scientists and science as a set of agents come to a consensus on what the true belief was. Yeah, Robert, it's very depressing. And I would encourage everyone, if you weren't there, please go back and watch the recorded, I think, January coffee hour, where the authors of the book talk about their modeling process. It's very, very interesting. They get very in depth. This is just an overview of the book. Again, I really, really recommend the book. And the book really goes forward by raising questions about the role of scientists in society. They ask questions like, how should science organize itself? What does it mean to have scientific authority in our divided society? What do we need to do to prevent a propagandist selectively sharing or selectively funding research? Oh, perfect. Thanks, Meg. So I want to pull out three themes that have really governed the questions that I've formed for discussion today. And we're about to turn it over to everybody. This is going to be open. We can jump into, yeah. Matthias, 100%. The models were simplified. They say this in the book over and over and over. Like they actually build on a lot of pre-existing models for influence and belief, and it would definitely be too. I can't get into it now, but yeah, it's very interesting. Again, I encourage everybody to read the book. So the three things that are going to guide our discussion today are the questions. One, what is our responsibility to science? And you'll see that every time I refer to science as an enterprise or truth as something that scientists pursue, it's in quotes, because the book makes a very compelling point that what truth is matters as far as our answers to these questions. What we as scientists decide to allow as truth in our jobs matters. So what's our responsibility to science when it comes to the way that we do science, organizing science, conducting science, peer review, like engaging in the processes from observation to publication? Question two, what is our responsibility to the truth when it comes to sharing science? That is to say, when we share our science with policymakers and the public, what are our responsibilities in terms of presenting the truth and not doing so in a way that is, let's say, unethical or selective, but also acknowledges the dangers of just giving information en masse to policymakers who don't understand it? And three, what is our responsibility to society at large when it comes to communicating science with the public and with policymakers? So not just sharing like, this is what I learned, but also sharing like, this is what science is about. This is what we do. Here are the goals of science. Here are the potential dangers of scientific activity. What is our responsibility to society as members of society? Okay, so this is a very light and simple discussion. I'm sure we'll solve all of the problems in the next 35 minutes. So really looking forward to that. We'll need somebody to volunteer to be first author on this paper. I'm sure it's going to be very simple to write. Let's jump into discussion one.